Oh, there's a cop there. Don't do it. Don't do it.
My side of the diesel 2830 story starts a year before at the C2C Express. I had really wanted to drive my 77 Cadillac under 40 hours, and it broke down 4 or 5 times on me going across the country. I really wanted to get under 40 hours, and before I'd ever cannonballed, I really thought I could beat 2850. After the C2C, I did not see how it was possible. How could you possibly shave 16 hours off the time I just did when I gave it all I had in the Cadillac? So after that, my one goal was I really want to get the Cadillac under 30 hours, but I realized if I could get a time under 34, that would put me in the top 30 cannonballers in history. And for me, at the time, I was content with that. I would love to have done that.
So the story of the diesel record really begins in Gulf Shores. In January of 2020, a lot of us who had participated in the C2C Express were in Gulf Shores for a reunion thrown by our good friend Denny. As we ended up at a bar right on the Florida-Alabama border called the Florabama. Ben Wilson, who runs the C2C Express, became a server that evening and was walking around with tray after tray of Long Island iced teas. It was impairing everybody's judgment, so much so that Ben and Eric decided that this early weekend in April was going to be a good time for all of us to have dinner in New York, and then once again, dinner in California.
And I see people over here start whispering, this year, and someone comes to me, April 4th, be in New York for lunch. You know, next day we're going to have dinner in LA. Oh, sounds like fun. I'm holding the Long Island iced tea. I look over at Sean. And that's it. That's no words were spoken. It was a simple gesture. Me and you, we're good.
But as we're aware, COVID happened. And once that happened, a lot of people backed out.
I am very involved in my grandmother's life. Every day I see my grandmother. I got very nervous about going into New York with everything I was hearing and seeing on the news. And the days leading up to the run, I could really tell that Sean was kind of thinking maybe I was on the fence. And then he had messaged, well, what about Darien? And as soon as he said, he'd be willing to go to Good Wives, I'm like, let's do that. I would love to go to Good Wives. I would love to stay out of Manhattan. My family told me if I went and did this and went to New York, I wasn't allowed around my grandmother for 2 weeks. I really didn't like that idea.
I kind of got all wrapped up into this when I met Sean the night of Doug's run at Dan Doucette's house. The day we set up all the CB radios we got from Walmart and all that, which didn't work at all, surprisingly. And we all met up there, and when they came through PA, when we got out to the freeway, and I knew Sean wanted to do it, and I low-key poked him like, hey, let me do this with you. If you ever need help, I'll be there for you. So then a few months later, he asked me if he wanted to go to Chicago for the fuel cell. I'm like, okay, I got nothing else going on because I just quit my job months before, and I was just buying and selling cars and flying all over the country doing random stuff anyways. So I was like, you know what, I'll go do that with you. So we drove out there, we drove back. I'm like, you know what, I got a good feeling about this. This is a good car. It's a good budget car compared to what everybody else runs. I was like, sure. So he calls me up about a week before it happens. He's like, hey, my buddy's out. Do you want to do this? And I straight up said, sure. Doug told me never to say no. And I don't say no, allegedly.
We thought the diesel record was within reason to be taken. So started prepping it, ended up getting a tune on the engine, bought a full suspension for it. My buddy John helped me build the car. Everything was done really on a budget basis, and so I started scouring Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and I found this 27-gallon aluminum fuel tank out in Chicago. And so Mark decided to accompany me out there, and I said, let me see how he drives. Let's see how he is in a car for 14 hours before we decide if he's going to be a co-driver. So for us, the diesel record was something that was kind of obscure. We knew Romold had taken a shot at it once before with his Audi. We knew that my car was capable of cruising at high speeds because of the spotting I had done for Doug and Arnie. And when it came time for what are we going to use, I just knew that a Volkswagen was built for highway cruising. So when I started looking for vendors for the tune on the engine, one of my requirements was the car comes with a factory 114 mile an hour speed limit. That had to be removed. The first time we spotted for Doug and Arnie, They caught up to us not even halfway across the state because I couldn't stay out in front of them. But I contacted a company out in Colorado. They provided a tune for me. They graciously lifted the factory speed limit after some negotiations about the liability of that, and provided me with something that really made the car excel. On the way to New Jersey, where we stayed in a hotel, we were meeting up with a good friend of ours named Yummy, who was going to do a solo run. He had a Cadillac that he was giving to his niece in California, and he thought the best way to do that would be to cannonball it across the country solo. So we met up with Yummy, stayed the night at the hotel, did some strategizing, and we were originally going to leave from the same place around the same time. But we just decided, you know what, that might attract a little bit too much attention. So Yummy decided to leave an hour after us from Red Ball, and we decided to change our location to Darien, Connecticut, which is the starting point of the 1979 Cannonball. We pulled up there, topped off our tanks in the gas station across the street, pulled around back, and met up with our good friend Chris Clemens, who was going to witness us off and kind of follow us out and do a little testing of his own. Hopped on to the highway, and away we went. Our first fuel stop was not scheduled to be until Chicago. We thought we could get away with between the 45 gallons of fuel on board, between the 27-gallon auxiliary tank, the 18-gallon factory tank, and the exceptional mileage that a TDI Volkswagen gets. We thought we could make it all the way to Chicago. Unfortunately, that didn't go as planned because, as Doug Tabbitt tells everybody who asks, you always have fuel problems. And we had no exception there.
We had a series of bad luck with the fuel filter. 2 filters clogged. After the second one clogged, I told them just take it out. We'll just use the filter housing as a barb fitting, and we'll let the car filter everything out after it filters in the main tank. It's a much better filter than the little one that we had, and it worked out great.
We didn't see any cops, no police officers anywhere. We went through PA without a hassle. We got back into Ohio, and that's when we pick up our spotters, who were our local guys that we're all friends with.
I didn't realize until we were halfway through Pennsylvania that there was a large amount of spotters from Doug and Arnie's run ahead of me. And when I found that out, that gave me that next level of confidence to keep going. For me, being from Ohio, I felt like we had an advantage in that state, having a plate from Ohio going through Ohio. When I come out the backside of the state, I was told my average, and I was astounded. And it was that, the confidence of the spotters. I had a guy on the internet out of Canada named Sean Mason who was overlaying our glimpse feed with Waze. He had tapped in the traffic cams along our route and was watching us. And he would message us, if there was something he was seeing up front on Waze over our glimpse feed, he would warn us, like, hey, be careful coming up. I see some cops. I would slow down and get going. That's a confidence booster. And when you're looking at the end of Angry Ursula, that's a confidence booster. Knowing that Doug and Arnie, the 2 fastest men to drive across country, took time out of their day to come out and help me achieve my goal, to me was amazing. Couldn't ask for anything more.
I'll always remember in the Angry Ursula, we would catch up to Arnie, and then he would just take off. And it was that sound of that car just will always replay in my mind.
First fuel stop in Illinois with Arnie, our second fuel stop overall, didn't go quite as planned. He took us to a gas station off of the interstate that did not have a diesel pump for automotive. We ended up going to a second gas station that had the same exact problem. And when you're in the midst of trying to attain a record, every minute counts. And so it was getting a little hairy and a little frustrating. He ends up taking us to a third station. Him and his guys hop out. They pump the fuel for us. They allow us to use the restrooms and everything else. And he says, hey, I'm going to take off ahead of you guys. I'm going to go and I'm going to set up and I'm going to get some film of you guys passing by. So he goes off and he goes up ahead and we're cruising right along, and Jason's driving, Mark is spotting, I'm sitting in the back seat.
And then we make this little bend, and then there's smoke in the air. And I'm like, whoa, there's something up there. So we slowly roll up to the scene, and it was Ursula spun out in the middle of the road. There's an 18-wheeler all the way across the freeway, touching both lanes on both sides through the median. I just see Arnie jump in the car. He fires it up, spins right back into the side, gets out on the side. He just says, go. And the moment that hit, I got instantly sick. And you get to this point where is it even worth it doing it? With the history Cannonball has, it wasn't even worth it to me. My teammates pretty much said, we got to keep doing this. We can't let everybody down who's watching us.
We didn't know if we should continue. When cannonballing has a perfect safety record, and you're out there setting your record, and this accident happens on your watch, we all got sick to our stomachs. We really thought we should just shut this down and go home. This is not right. But Arnie told us to keep going, so we did. And it took about 3 hours before we heard from him again. We were clear across Iowa at that point, into Nebraska. That really helped us feel better. We got back into it at that point. You know, we were 100% once we heard from him.
I'm looking through the binoculars, looking for people sitting in the median, Charger taillights, everything that could be a cop car. It didn't matter. I was calling everything out.
Across Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, all those states, it's very flat, very dark, very light traffic this weekend. So Jason Adkins really was just hammered down. I mean, the speeds that he kept that car at, I didn't think it were capable of.
People had always wondered what would happen if someone just went all out and didn't care what was ahead of them. Part of me was doing that. Part of me really thought there was nothing in front of us that was going to catch us and we were going to do it. So that's how I drove. Sometimes me and Mark didn't agree on my driving because Mark thought it was a cop car in front of us. And I would look at the car and I would keep up my pace until I made my decision, cop or not. You know, Mark would be over there, you should slow down. You should slow down. I was having the time of my life and I wanted to keep going because people were relaying messages like, dude, you're holding averages faster than, you know, Doug and Arnie did through this state. And when we got up to the 105 average across the Great Plains, that for me was, I'd never felt, you know, anything better than cannonballing in my life. Like, oh my God, we're going to do this.
I woke up to the car swerving to miss a deer somewhere in Nebraska. And I hate Nebraska. It's such a boring drive. It's probably the most boringest drive in all of the Cannonball. Because it's so straight, there's nothing there for miles. You'll be doing 100 miles an hour forever. For probably 300 miles and not see anything. And then I remember the sunrise coming up as soon as we entered Colorado. On the west side of Denver is where it was, started getting beautiful. And that kind of renews you. Like, wow, we got to keep doing this.
The Rockies are high altitude, very twisty, and you know it's April, it's still early, so the roads aren't the best condition at that point, a little bit of frost here and there. And one thing we realize is that when you have a turbo, you think that compensates for every lack of air pressure and altitude, but for a car with 170 horsepower, it needs all the help it can get. And one of the things that I was afraid of, being a DSG transmission in a Volkswagen, that to me in my mind was extremely fragile, was leave it alone. Don't do anything with it. So it always stayed a gear too high. There were points where we could only hit 70 miles an hour because we weren't keeping the revs in the engine up high enough.
I'm in the back seat and I'm trying to play it cool back here, but inside I'm back there going like this. Like, oh man, I'm like, Sean, please tell me you got this thing punched to the floor. He's like, dude, 78's all it's got. 78's all it's got. So I tell myself, it is what it is. There's nothing Sean or me can do at this point to get this car any faster. I kept telling myself that for 20 minutes and I calmed down and relaxed and I let Sean drive through the mountains. The whole time I'm in back just wishing the car would just get in the triple digits because I'm watching the average just plummet and it's killing me inside. Because at that point, there'd only been one team ever to average 100 mile an hour across the country. And I really wanted to be the second team ever to do it.
When we get into Utah, you start seeing the red rocks. And when that sun hits it, it's such a beautiful sight. All you see is the red mountains as far as the eye can see. And that just rejuvenates you. It's like I wasn't even tired anymore. So we just kept going.
You come through Arizona, you go through the gorge, you head into Nevada, and my mother lives in Nevada, okay? And so my mom is, mothers can be a little, stiff sometimes, but my mom's cool, right? So she knows what we're doing. She's following our glimpse feed. She thinks it's fantastic. So she lives on the northern end of Las Vegas, and she decides that her and her husband are going to come out to 15 and cheer us on as we go by. So we're barreling down. We're doing some excessive speeds on 15. It's super wide, nice and clean. And so we come up over this hill, and there they are. They're standing on the side of the road. They got a big American flag hanging out there waiting for us. And I asked her to film us as we go by. And so I see her with her little camera up going by. We're honking at her and everything else. And so onward we go into California. It wasn't until after the Cannonball run, when we're coming back through Las Vegas, Mark and I stayed there a night, and I found out that my mom had such a hard time with the mechanics of her cell phone that she literally only got a 4-second video of us going by. And if you squint, you can see Jason Adkins' hand out the window like this, and that was all she got. And I wrote her pretty good about that. So at one point, we're coming around, and we come up on a street race. It was the strangest thing. We come around this bend. The bend's kind of an uphill turning bend. And like 7 or 8 cars just come out and spread out across the highway and slow everybody down.
It was like 5 Mustangs, a Volkswagen CC, and then something stupid. And the guy's hanging out the window with a GoPro. So somewhere in California, there's some awesome GoPro footage of us blowing past these guys.
So Jason does what any good cannonballer does. puts his foot to the floor, and uses the bonus lane. We're heading towards Redondo Beach, and all of a sudden, Jason exclaims, I missed the turn.
And I just told Jason, you got to go make the first right possible. We'll take side streets. It's all about it'll all double back to right where we need to go.
So he gets off the next exit, and immediately my chat starts filling up on my phone. Why are you guys on surface streets? What's going on? Did you guys break down? Is everything okay? And I'm like, I don't have time to respond to this. We're on a Cannonball here. We're trying to finish up.
And we get the traffic light after traffic light, and I'm like, Sean, this is your car. I need you to tell me I can run these red lights. He's like, go for it. And we'd look both ways. I would stop at every light, not see nothing, and I would go through it. I wasn't just blowing red lights.
And I just remember rolling up to the stoplights. Can we blow this? Can we blow this? Oh, there's a cop there. Don't do it. Don't do it. And the one time we almost did it, and I just called out, there's a cop at that donut shop because there was a donut shop on the corner. It was the last stoplight before we actually got into where Portofino is.
There's nothing sweeter than when you finally get to the finish and you see the Portofino and you see the drive leading up to it. And as we pull up to it, Tim Daly's there waiting for us with his camera, and he gets, the witnessing of us finishing, and he gets the pictures of it and everything. And we pull up, we stop, and Mark immediately hits the stop button on the timer, and it says 28 hours, 30 minutes, and 59 seconds. And what a great time that was. And Jason and I get out the car, and we're congratulating each other and Mark, and it's just an overwhelming experience to be part of the history of everything, to get to the point where the people who you idolized and the history that goes back to the 70s, you dream about this as a kid. The Great American Road Trip. There's no greater road trip than going from one coast to the other and seeing how fast you can do it. I've dreamt about that day for years. And
it was a great experience. In my book of life, this is one of the best things I've probably ever done. And it was a great chapter of it.
What at the time was the second fastest time in history. Well, the problem was a friend was right behind us doing a solo run. And he's actually one of the people that I watched in a documentary years ago that inspired me to do this. As we came across the country, Sean would spot everything and let the other guy know on glimpse what was ahead of him. And when we got to the Portofino, we knew that the other guy, Yummy, was going to beat us. So we're sitting there and actually cheering the guy on, pulling into the Portofino that knocks us back to third place. And then several hours later, we get a message from Ed Bullion telling us, hey, there's these guys in this white Audi heading cross country. You guys want to maybe stay around and check this out and make sure this is legit? Sure, we'll stop and check it out. So we all go to the hotel, have some drinks, and 5-6 hours later, we go back to the Portofino waiting for them. And sure enough, they pull in, and these kids are just excited. And then the cops show up and tell us, to disperse. So in the course of one day, we went from being second place to third place to fourth place, all in the course of one day. So I don't know if that's the most Cannonball records ever broken in one day or not, but I would imagine it might be.
We'd like to thank Avalon King for their continued support of the VINwiki YouTube channel. From crazy projects like Casey's King Zero to shooting derelict AMG cars off of a cliff in Alaska, they're interested in a whole lot more with respect to the automotive hobby than just making our cars look great. But the ceramic coating is awesome, and you can get it for $25 off at the link in the description below. So be sure to check it out, try it on your car, let us know what you think in the comments, and let them continue to support idiots like us.